On April 23rd, 2018, in the heart of Toronto, a white rental van mounted on the sidewalk and tore through one of the city's busiest pedestrian areas. And the driver did not hesitate. He didn't swerve. He didn't brake. He just kept going until bodies littered the streets. 10 people died that day. 16 were wounded, and the city was shaken. And the country was horrified. The man behind the wheel was Alek Minassian. He was 25 years old, quiet, socially awkward, diagnosed with autism. He had no criminal record, no known history of violence, and yet he committed one of the deadliest vehicular attacks in Canadian history. And when the story broke, the world wanted answers. Why would someone do this? The answer came quite quickly and disturbingly. Minassian, it turned out, identified with the Incel community. He posted on Facebook just before the attack, hailing Elliot Rodger as the supreme gentleman and declaring the Incel rebellion has already begun. But if we stop there, we miss the real story because Alek Minassian, he didn't just become a killer because of a forum post. His radicalization didn't start with the ideology. It instead started with isolation. And so to understand that, we have to rewind the tape, not to raise accountability, but to uncover what the rest of us need to see before we move to the next explosion of pain in this story. You see, Alek Minassian grew up in suburban Toronto. From early childhood, he was different. He was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. He had difficulty with social cues. He struggled to make friends, and oftentimes he withdrew from his peers. He wasn't violent. He wasn't hateful, but he was lonely. He he was the kid who no one picked for their team. He was the classmate who sat alone at lunchtime. He was the young man who watched the world connect without him. And when that feeling lasts long enough, it starts to shape your reality. You see, over time, isolation becomes an identity. And that's what happened to Alek. He wasn't just alone, he actually felt unfixable. And that's the moment of that despair turns into danger, not just for the person experiencing it, but for everyone around them. And it's tempting to think that people like Minassian are just broken, that there's something deeply wrong inside them from the start. But if we take that view, we rob ourselves of the ability to see the warning lights, the warning signs that are there, because Alek wasn't some alien creature. He was human, human in his ache and pain, human in his anger and his hunger for connection, human in the way that he tried again and again to be a part of something that the world didn't seem to have enough space for him to be in. And so he tried to go to college. He tried to work in IT. He wanted to date. And every time he felt like he'd failed. And when you feel like a failure in every arena that's supposed to make life meaningful, you start to look for explanations. That's when the ideology becomes seductive. Minassian didn't find the incel community because he wanted to hurt people. He found it because he was desperate to feel understood. He read the forums, he learned the language, and then he started internalizing that worldview. It's not my fault. he heard people saying there. It's their fault. I'm a victim of biology, of society, of feeble female hypergamy, of unfair standards. And in that twisted logic, Alek found something that he hadn't felt in years, and that was the sense of belonging. This is the dangerous gift that ideology offers to those who are isolated. It gives pain a purpose. It gives rejection a name. It gives invisibility a voice. But it also gives permission to resent, to blame, to dehumanize, and ultimately to destroy. So let's pause here a moment, because it's easy to judge. It's easy to say he chose evil. And yes, he did choose evil. But why did that choice feel logical to him? Because no one stopped the spiral. Because no one interrupted the storyline. Because the pain was louder than the warning signs. And he wasn't just craving violence. He was craving significance. And in a world where no one told him that he mattered, he decided that he would matter by force. He said it himself during his police interrogation. He wanted to inspire others. He wanted to become a soldier. He wanted to be remembered, not for who he loved, but for who he was, not for who he helped, but for what he eventually destroyed. That's the cruel power of feeling unseen for too long. It convinces people that any attention is better than being invisible. And here's the truth that we don't want to admit, and that is there are thousands of men today who feel just like Alek Minassian once did. They're not killers. They haven't hurt anyone, but they're simmering. They're waiting. They're wondering if they'll ever be chosen, if they'll ever be noticed or ever be wanted. They don't trust women. They don't trust society. They don't even trust themselves. So they spend hours online reading the same forums, absorbing the same narratives, and the more they read, the more it makes sense. The more they hurt, the more righteous their resentment feels. And this is how isolation becomes an ideology. It's not in one step, but it's in many small incremental steps. And unless something breaks that chain, it can lead to devastation. So how does ideology take root in someone like Alek Minassian? It doesn't start with hate. Instead, it starts with hunger, with a hunger for connection, a hunger for understanding, a hunger to know that your life has weight and meaning and presence. But when that hunger goes unmet for too long, it festers. And when it festers without being acknowledged, it searches for something to cling to, anything that can offer clarity in the fog of loneliness that so many men experience. And the incel community, in its most toxic corners, offers that clarity. It says, you're not broken, you're betrayed. The world was rigged against you from the start. And you're not the problem. It's they who are the problem. And this is where pain becomes fuel. You're given a name for your suffering: involuntary celibacy. You're given enemies. They're the women, they're the chads, they're the normies who'll never understand you. You're given heroes like Elliot Rodger, saints who took action. You're given a sense of purpose, that the incel rebellion is the ideology of this revolt. And suddenly, your isolation isn't just a personal tragedy. It's part of a movement. And that movement does not require healing. It requires loyalty. This is the part that many don't understand, especially when they ask things like, how could anyone admire what Minassian did? You see, it's not about admiration for the act. Instead, it's about resonance with the pain that's deeply experienced in this community. When someone sees their own invisible wounds mirrored in a public tragedy, they don't necessarily see a villain. What they see is a reflection. Alek Minassian became, for some, a symbol of defiance, of finally being heard, of refusing to be ignored. That is the dangerous magnetism of martyrdom in wounded communities. And the more society mocks and belittles or simplifies this pain, the more powerful that unmet need becomes. But let's be absolutely clear. Minassian, he made a choice. He planned his attack. He rented a van. He timed it. He posted publicly. He knew what he was doing. And he is responsible. But what led him there is not just a story of an individual pathology. It's a story of neglect. It's a story of a world that doesn't know what to do with men who feel left behind. It's a story of emotional needs that went unnamed for years until they erupted. And when we reduce his actions to madness or evil, we don't prevent the next tragedy. We only guarantee that we're going to be blindsided again. So what do we do instead? We get honest. We talk about the loneliness, especially as it's in a crisis form currently, especially for young men. We talk about how masculinity is often taught through suppression instead of through expression. We talk about the ways that boys are conditioned to see love as a reward for performance instead of a birthright of being. We name the fact that some young men feel deeply unprepared for relationships, for intimacy, or for emotional vulnerability. And yet these men are told to just try harder without ever being taught how. We recognize that radicalization doesn't begin with forums. It begins with a failure to belong. Alek Minassian's life was filled with moments where intervention was possible. Peers noticed he was withdrawn. Teachers saw that he didn't quite fit in. Coworkers observed his lack of social awareness. Family saw his fixation with online communities. But nothing truly interrupted the spiral. There was no safe space for Alek to say, I feel broken, or I feel invisible, or I don't know how to connect. I don't know who I am unless someone chooses me. And without that space, he turned to places where the pain would not be healed, but instead where it was weaponized. And that's what we have to change. We need new spaces, not just online, but even in real life, where men can come out of hiding, where it's okay to say things like, I'm lonely, or I'm scared, or I feel unlovable, or I don't know how to be close to someone. We need leaders and friends and counselors, mentors, not to fix men, but instead to see them, to remind them that worth doesn't come from conquest or comparison, that intimacy isn't something that's earned through dominance, but something that's instead built through courage. That's the work of healing. That's the bridge back. And and it starts long before a van ever hits the sidewalk. This is not about this is not about letting perpetrators off the hook in any way. It's instead about pulling others back from the ledge before they arrive there. Because for every Alek Minassian that there is out there, there are thousands more who are silently wondering, would anyone care if I disappeared? Or does my pain matter? Is there anyone who actually sees me? We must answer that question now and not after the headlines. Let's talk a little bit about the significance, because at the heart of Alek Minassian's story, and at the heart of so many who feel drawn to his ideology, is a single aching question. And that is, do I matter? This question is not asked out loud. It doesn't show up in college essays or in job interviews, but it pulses beneath the surface of every isolated life. And when the world doesn't answer, the question gets louder. It turns into an obsession, into bitterness, into the need to prove worth any way possible. That's what makes Minassian's case so terrifying. He didn't just want to hurt people. He he wanted to matter. He wanted to leave a mark, even if that mark was horror. In his post-arrest interrogation, Minassian said something quite chilling. He believed his attack would actually inspire others. He thought of himself as a soldier in this rebellion, a soldier in a war of invisible against the beautiful, a war of the unchosen against those who are adored. He had he'd internalized the incel narrative so deeply that mass murder became in his mind an act of justice. And this is how disconnection can distort the soul. It convinces you that hurting others will give your life meaning. That if the world won't see your humanity, then at least it will feel your fury. But here's what we need to realize, that that search for significance is not evil. It's universal. You see, every human needs to feel like they matter. that their story has weight, that their presence makes a difference. When people don't get that, when they don't get that feeling from healthy sources like family and friends, purpose or connection, they're going to look for it anywhere, even if that anywhere is in the darkness, even if that is in destruction. And that's what makes the incel community so dangerous and so devastating to those who feel isolated. It offers a counterfeit meaning. It says things like, you are a part of something. You are oppressed, and you are righteous in your anger and your expression of rage, and you are chosen by us. But it's not a real sense of belonging. It's actually what we call trauma bonding. It's a community that's built on shared hate instead of shared healing. It doesn't elevate the soul. Instead, it weaponizes the wound. So what would it take to offer a different kind of belonging? One that's rooted in truth, in accountability, in humanity. A kind of a belonging where you don't have to hate anyone to feel seen. Where your value is not measured by who desires you. Where your story doesn't have to end in pain to get attention. It would take intimacy, not just physical or romantic, but emotional intimacy. The kind of intimacy that says, I see you even here in the midst of your pain and your isolation. The kind of intimacy that welcomes people before they feel they're perfect. The kind of intimacy that holds space without shamefulness. It's the kind that disrupts despair with dignity. It would take integrity as well. Integrity, a return to that alignment between your inner values and your outer actions. A rejection of the false narratives that say worth must be proven and pain must be punished and love is something we deserve only after transformation. You see, Minassian, he never found that kind of community. Or if he did, it didn't reach him in time. He lived most of his life behind screens. He struggled with eye contact. He fixated on rules, and he was absorbed in ideology like it was a user manual for life. And when no one helped him to rewrite the code, he crashed, and he took others down with him. And that is the cost of unattended isolation, not just to the person who's feeling it, but to the world who are around them. Now, we could end the story here. We could say Alek Minassian was a broken man who broke others. We could close the book and move on and hope that it never happens again. But what if we used this story for something more? What if we let it change how we engage with the people who are around us, who are walking that same road, but haven't reached the edge yet? What if we let this kind of story open our eyes to signs of ideological seduction? And what if we refuse to wait until someone snaps before we started asking questions? Who in my world feels invisible? And who is slipping away while smiling? Or or who hasn't been asked how they really are doing in years. You see, you don't have to be a therapist to make a difference. You you just have to notice. You just have to see the boy who is in your class who always eats alone, perhaps. He could use a word. The coworker who never speaks unless they're spoken to. Or or maybe the friend who never reaches out first but always responds right away. The man who jokes about being undateable like it doesn't sting. These aren't punchlines. These are people. They're people, everyday people who are making silent decisions about what their life is worth. And we can't solve everything, but we can do something. We may not be able to prevent every tragedy, but we can at least refuse to feed the lie that worth comes from attention. We can refuse at least to validate the bitterness that breeds harm. And we can become people who offer presence and not just performance. So so what now? What do we do with a story like Alek Minassian's? We could try to forget it. We could bury it under the media headlines and court transcripts and the outrage, the social outrage. We could label him as a monster and move on. But if we do, we miss that opportunity to confront something that is urgent. And that is that there are people walking through this world right now who are feeling unseen and unheard, and who are carrying some kind of emotional decay that brought Minassian to his breaking point. And they don't look like killers. They look like your classmate. They look like your brother. They look like your coworker and your son. They they don't start with hatred. They instead start with a hunger. And if that hunger comes unmet, it becomes an ideology. So, so let's talk a little bit about what prevention could look like. Not prevention in the cold clinical sense, but in the human sense. What if the next Alek Minassian doesn't need a diagnosis or a program? What if what he needs is contact? Someone to ask him not just how his day is going, but how his heart is doing. Someone to invite him, not just into productivity, but again, into presence. Someone who doesn't flinch when the loneliness leaks out, who, who doesn't recoil from his insecurity, who, who doesn't mock his confusion or his turn to express longing without it becoming a punchline. Because maybe, just maybe, that kind of connection could have changed everything. I mean, let's be honest. We don't have a culture that's built for this kind of intervention, do we? We don't teach emotional fluency to our young boys. We, we don't normalize seeking help without shame. And we don't frame masculinity as something that's rooted in empathy and in introspection. What we do is we valorize stoicism and we reward domination and we celebrate detachment. And and then we're shocked when someone finally collapses under under the weight of being emotionally constipated for 2 decades. We we need a better blueprint, don't we? A model of manhood that doesn't just tell boys to man up, but instead invites them to open up. A culture where emotional intimacy is not a liability. Instead, it's a strength. That's what this bridge back to us is all about. This whole series, it's not just about this podcast. It's not just about a critique of incel culture. It's a call to rebuild the connections that keep us human, to tell a different story about what it means to be seen, to to offer a new script for those who've only known silence, and to remind people that you don't have to be exceptional to be loved. You just have to be honest. And here's the honest truth. Alek Minassian wanted to be remembered. He wanted to be seen. And now he is seen, but he's not seen for his humanity. It's for his harm that he was remembered. And let that be the last time a young man thinks destruction is the only way to prove that he existed. Instead, let's begin telling better stories where pain is not hidden, but pain is actually honored, where longing isn't buried, but it's brought to light, where being unwanted does not end in rage, but instead it begins one's experience of healing. So if you're listening to this and you see yourself in Alek's story, not in what he did, but in how he actually felt, then this next part is for you. You are not wrong for wanting connection. You are not broken for desiring love, and you are not weak for aching to feel or to be significant. But the pain that you carry is your responsibility to face, not to unleash, not to bury, but to actually name, to share, and to walk through. You are not the sum of your rejection. You're not cursed to be alone. You are not forgotten. You matter deeply. Not because someone picked you, not because you achieved something that you thought would give you significance, not because your rage was loud enough to earn you attention. You matter simply because you exist. And you're allowed to want more than survival in this life. You're allowed to want connecting in meaningful ways with others. And the good news is it's still possible for you. But it won't come through this ideology that is so compelling for many others in devastation and carnage. It won't come through bitterness. It won't come through violence. Instead, it comes through being courageous enough to be seen without performance, being courageous enough to risk intimacy. Intimacy is intimacy. The courage to take one step back from the edge and to say, maybe I'm not beyond belonging after all. See, that's the bridge there. That's the invitation. That's where the work is at. And it's not just for incels, it's for all of us. Because every one of us knows what it feels like to be invisible, to be overlooked, to wonder if we have been missed. And every one of us, we can be part of this story that says something like, no more. No more boys who are left behind. No more pain that's turned into performance. No more hunger that ends in harm. Instead, we can build something different. We can build something that's stronger. We can build something true. And together, we can make this happen. Won't you join me in building this bridge back to us?